I lied on my resume to land a six-figure job at 18, but I didn't realize I was actually being recruited as the perfect fall guy for a deadly global conspiracy. I was 18 years old, clutching a lukewarm paper cup of corporate-grade coffee and staring at a spreadsheet that looked like it had been written in a language I didn't speak. This was my first real job, a junior data entry position at a mid-sized logistics firm called Arca Global. To most people, logistics is boring. To me, it was a paycheck that would finally get me out of my parents' basement and into a studio apartment that didn't smell like damp laundry and regret. My cubicle was in the back corner of the third floor, a place where the fluorescent lights hummed with a headache-inducing frequency, and the carpet was a shade of gray that sucked the soul right out of you. My job was simple. Take the physical shipping manifests and cross-reference them with the digital logs. It was mind-numbing, but I was determined to be the best damn data entry clerk they'd ever seen. That was until Marcus showed up. Marcus was the guy everyone wanted to be, or at least the guy everyone listened to. He was 10 years older than me, wore suits that actually fit him, and had this way of leaning against a cubicle wall that made him look like he owned the building. He was a senior analyst, which in my 18-year-old mind was basically a god. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, Marcus stopped by my desk. He watched me struggle with a VLOOKUP function for a few minutes before letting out a dry, rhythmic chuckle. "You're doing it the hard way, kid," he said, tossing a stress ball into the air and catching it with practiced ease. "You're working like a guy who wants to stay in this cubicle until he's 60. You want to move up? You got to play the game." I looked up, blinking. The game? I'm just trying to make sure these crate numbers match the digital IDs. Marcus leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Management doesn't care about crate numbers. They care about efficiency and specialized skill sets. Look at you, you're sharp, but on paper, you're just another high school grad. If you want the real money, you need to be an expert. In what? I asked, genuinely curious. Systems optimization and forensic data auditing, he said, the words rolling off his tongue like he'd rehearsed them. The department head, Mr. Sterling, is looking for someone to help with a private transition project in the high-value accounts division. It pays triple your current rate, but you have to know Lumina Grid software. I felt a pit in my stomach. I've never even heard of Lumina Grid. Marcus grinned, and for a second, he looked like a shark. Neither has half the office. It's a niche, high-end platform. Here's what you do. Update your internal employee profile. Say you're certified in Lumina Grid. Say you spent your last 2 summers freelancing as a systems auditor. If they ask for proof, tell them you signed an NDA with a private contractor. They won't check. They're desperate for someone who can speak the language. Isn't that lying? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. It's called aggressive self-marketing, Marcus corrected. Everyone does it. I told them I had a master's from Chicago. I don't. I have an associate's from a community college and a lot of ambition. Look at where I am now. I spent the next 3 hours in a moral tug of war. But then I looked at my bank balance, $214.50, and thought about the rent for that studio apartment. That night, I went home and spent 6 hours watching YouTube tutorials on Lumina Grid. It turned out to be a specialized, incredibly complex auditing tool used for tracking international luxury goods. I didn't understand half of it, but I learned the terminology. I learned about ghost shunting, ledger mirroring, and packet voiding. The next morning, with my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, I updated my internal company profile. I added the certifications. I puffed up my experience until I looked like a 24-year-old prodigy instead of an 18-year-old kid who still got carded for R-rated movies. I figured it would take weeks for anyone to notice. I figured I had time to actually learn the software. I was wrong. Less than 2 hours after I hit save, my desk phone rang. It was the internal line. The caller ID read, Sterling J. Executive Office. My hand shook as I picked up the receiver. "Hello, this is Alex." "Alex," a gravelly, authoritative voice barked. "I saw your updated credentials. Why wasn't I informed we had a Lumina grid specialist in the entry-level pool? Come to the 12th floor. Now, bring your laptop. The 12th floor was the executive suite. It was all glass, mahogany, and silence. When I stepped off the elevator, the air felt colder, more expensive. I was ushered into an office that was larger than my entire apartment. Mr. Sterling, a man who looked like he was carved out of granite, didn't even look up from his desk. "Sit," he commanded. "Marcus spoke highly of you, said you were a diamond in the rough. We're having a discrepancy in our premium transit accounts. The previous auditor, let's just say he's no longer with the firm. I need someone who can go deep into the encrypted ledgers and find out why $4 million in electronics shipments are showing as delivered in the system, but the insurance claims are still being filed as lost at sea." He pushed a silver encrypted drive across the desk toward me. My throat was so dry I couldn't swallow. This was it. The lie had worked, and now I was expected to perform a miracle with software I barely knew how to open. "I need a preliminary report by Friday," Sterling said, finally looking up. His eyes were piercing, like he was looking right through my aggressive self-marketing and into my terrified soul. "If you find the leak, there's a $50,000 bonus in it for you. If you're wasting my time, well, let's just hope you're as good as your profile says you are." I took the drive and retreated to a private office they had assigned me on the 11th floor. It had a door that locked. It had a view of the city. It was everything I wanted, and I felt like a total fraud. I spent 48 hours straight in that office. I drank so much caffeine I could hear my own pulse. I hacked my way through the Lumina grid interface, using every tutorial and forum post I could find. Slowly, painfully, the data started to make sense. But as I began to mirror the ledgers, as the software called it, I realized Marcus was right about one thing. The company was desperate for an auditor, but they weren't looking for a mistake. As the Lumina Grid software finished its deep scan of the premium transit accounts, a series of red flags began to pop up across my screen, thousands of them. Each one represented a shipment of high-end GPS, medical equipment, and luxury watches. According to the shipping manifests I'd been entering downstairs, these items were being loaded onto trucks in New Jersey. According to the Lumina logs, they were being packet voided, essentially deleted from the inventory, the moment they left the warehouse. But it wasn't a glitch, it was a pattern. I leaned back, my eyes burning. I had found the $4 million discrepancy Sterling was looking for. But as I clicked into the source code of the deletions to see who had authorized them, my blood turned to ice. The authorizations weren't coming from a hacker or a rival firm. They were coming from an internal terminal. Terminal 44B. I knew that terminal. I walked past it every single day to get to the break room. It was Marcus's desk, but that wasn't the part that made me want to vomit. As I dug deeper, bypassing a secondary firewall that I shouldn't have been able to crack, a new window popped up. It was a hidden directory labeled Project Revenant. I clicked it, expecting more spreadsheets. Instead, a live video feed opened. It showed a dark, cavernous warehouse. I recognized the Arca Global logo on the wall, but the warehouse wasn't empty. It was filled with crates, thousands of them, and in the center of the room, under a single harsh spotlight, was a group of men in suits. One of them was Mr. Sterling. Another was Marcus, and they were standing next to a crate that had been pried open, revealing not electronics, but stacks of vacuum-sealed bricks of white powder. Suddenly, the door to my private office clicked. I hadn't heard the footsteps on the thick carpet. I slowly turned my head, my heart stopping in my chest. Marcus was standing there, leaning against the doorframe just like he always did. But this time, he wasn't holding a stress ball. He was holding a silenced pistol, and his trademark grin was gone. "I told you to play the game, Alex," he said softly. "I didn't tell you to win it." The silence in the room was so thick I could hear the faint, high-pitched whine of the computer monitor. Marcus didn't move. He just stood there, the silenced pistol looking like a heavy, unnatural extension of his arm. The man who had been my mentor, the guy who had taught me how to play the game, was now looking at me like I was a bug. He was deciding whether or not to crush. "You weren't supposed to find that folder, Alex," Marcus said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "You were supposed to find the $4 million hole, trace it to a defunct shell company I'd already set up, and then accept your $50,000 bonus as hush money. You would have been part of the team. You would have been set for life." "Set for life?" I stammered, my hands hovering over the keyboard. "You're smuggling drugs, Marcus. That video, that's not electronics. That's Project Revenant." Marcus sighed, a sound of genuine disappointment. "Logistics is the perfect cover. Thousands of crates move through our ports every day. No one checks the high-value electronics once they've been lost at sea and the insurance has been paid. We get the payout and we keep the product. It's a closed loop. But then you had to go and be a prodigy." "I lied about the credentials, Marcus. I don't know what I'm doing," I yelled, hoping someone in the hallway might hear me. "That's the beauty of it," Marcus said, taking a step into the room and kicking the door shut behind him. The lock clicked, a sound that felt like a coffin lid closing. "You lied. On paper, you're a fraud. If I kill you now and delete your expert logs, it looks like a junior clerk got caught embezzling, panicked, and did something drastic. Or better yet, I leave you alive, and when the FBI eventually comes knocking, I point to the kid who faked his resume and had administrative access to the encrypted ledgers. Who do you think they'll believe? The senior analyst with a 10-year record or the 18-year-old liar?" My mind was racing at 1,000 miles an hour. He was right. I had walked right into a perfect frame-up. By exaggerating my skills, I had given them the perfect scapegoat. I wasn't the auditor. I was the fall guy. "Sterling knows," I asked, trying to keep my voice from cracking. "Sterling owns it," Marcus replied. He raised the gun slightly, the black circle of the barrel pointing directly at my chest. "Now stand up. We're going to take a little walk down to the loading bay. There's a shipment leaving in 20 minutes that needs a witness." I looked at the screen. The Lumina Grid software was still running. My finger was hovering over the Enter key. During my 48-hour deep dive, I discovered a function called Global Broadcast. It was designed to sync inventory logs across every Arca Global hub in the world: London, Tokyo, Dubai. If I hit that key, the Project Revenant folder, the video feed, and the mirrored ledgers wouldn't just be on this computer. They would be on every screen in the company. "Marcus," I said, my voice suddenly steady, "did you know that Lumina Grid has an auto-ping feature for unauthorized access?" Marcus frowned, his eyes flickering to the screen for a fraction of a second. "What are you talking about?" "I didn't just find the folder," I lied, my heart hammering against my ribs. "I set a dead man's switch. If my biometric signature, my login, isn't refreshed every 10 minutes, the entire Revenant directory gets uploaded to the cloud, and not just our cloud. I've routed it to the Department of Justice's TIP portal." It was a total bluff. I didn't even know if the software could do that, but I'd spent the last 2 days learning the jargon, and I used it now like a shield. Marcus froze. He knew I was a liar. That was why he'd picked me. But he didn't know how much of a liar I was. He couldn't be sure if I was bluffing or if I really was the prodigy my profile claimed I was. "You're lying," he hissed, but the gun wavered. "Try me," I said, leaning back, trying to look far more confident than I felt. "Kill me, and within 10 minutes, every federal agent from here to D.C. will have Sterling's face on their monitors. Is that a game you want to play?" For a long, agonizing minute, the only sound was the hum of the server rack in the corner. Marcus was calculating. I could see the gears turning behind his eyes. He wasn't a killer by trade. He was a corporate shark. He liked clean lines and low risks. "Fine," he said, lowering the gun. "You want to talk? We'll talk. But you're coming with me to see Sterling. He's the one who decides if you're a partner or a liability." He gestured with the gun for me to get up. I grabbed my laptop, my only leverage, and preceded him out of the office. The 11th floor was empty now. The late shift workers had already gone home. The hallway felt like a gauntlet. As we reached the elevator, Marcus pressed the button for the basement, the loading docks. My plan had worked to get me out of the office, but I was just moving from one trap to another. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. We stepped inside, and Marcus hit the emergency stop button between floors. The car jolted and stayed still. "One last chance, Alex," Marcus said, turning to face me. He looked tired now, the facade of the suave senior analyst slipping. "Give me the admin password to the dead man's switch. Tell me how to disable it, and I'll make sure you get out of the city tonight. I'll even give you enough cash to start over. If we go down to that basement, Sterling won't be as patient as I am. He doesn't care about global broadcasts. He has people in the DOJ. He has people everywhere. Your little upload won't even make it past the first firewall." I looked at the floor numbers on the digital display. We were suspended between the 4th and 5th floors. "I don't believe you," I said. "If Sterling had the DOJ in his pocket, you wouldn't be so worried about that folder." Marcus's face darkened. He reached out and grabbed me by the collar, slamming me against the mirrored wall of the elevator. The laptop clattered to the floor. "You think you're so smart?" he snarled. "You're an 18-year-old kid who's seen too many movies. This isn't a game. This is billions of dollars. Do you have any idea how many people are on the payroll? The police, the port authorities, the shipping unions? They all want Project Revenant to succeed. You're not a hero, Alex. You're a glitch in the system, and I'm about to delete you." He raised the gun again, pressing the cold metal of the silencer against my temple. "The password now." My breath hitched. I looked down at the laptop on the floor. The screen was still glowing. In the reflection of the elevator's polished chrome, I saw something Marcus didn't. The global broadcast hadn't waited for me to hit enter. When Marcus had slammed me against the wall, my foot had kicked the laptop. The cursor had been hovering over the sync button. On the screen, a progress bar was moving with agonizing slowness. Syncing, 82%, 84%. If I could just stall him for 30 more seconds, the data would be out. But if he looked down, he'd see it. He'd see that the dead man's switch was actually just a live upload. "The password is... It's encrypted," I stammered, trying to draw his eyes to mine. "It's a 24-bit alphanumeric string. I have it written down in my wallet." "Get it," he barked, loosening his grip just enough for me to reach into my back pocket. I fumbled with my wallet, my heart hammering. 89%, 92%. "Hurry up," Marcus yelled. I pulled out a crumpled receipt and started reading random numbers. 4 Alpha Niner 7. 96%. 98%. "Wait," Marcus said, his eyes narrowing. He looked down at the laptop. His face went pale. "What is that? What is that bar?" He shoved me aside and lunged for the computer. I didn't think, I just acted. I threw my entire weight against him, tackling him into the control panel of the elevator. The gun went off, a muffled thwip, and the mirror behind my head shattered into 1,000 jagged diamonds. The elevator suddenly groaned. The emergency stoplight flickered and died. The car began to plummet, not at a free fall, but at a high-speed descent toward the basement. The laptop screen flashed bright green. Upload complete. The elevator doors shrieked as they were forced open by the building's automated safety system. We weren't in the basement. We were in the lobby. I scrambled out of the elevator, glass crunching under my shoes. I expected to see the night security guards, or maybe the police I hoped had been alerted. Instead, the lobby was filled with men in tactical gear. They weren't police. They wore the Arca Global security patches, but they were carrying submachine guns. And standing at the front of the line, holding a radio, was Mr. Sterling. He looked at the elevator, then at me, then at Marcus, who was stumbling out behind me, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. Sterling didn't look angry. He looked relieved. He looked at the massive digital billboard in the lobby, the one that usually showed stock prices and company news, Every single screen in the lobby was flickering. The Project Revenant video, the drugs, the warehouse, the faces, was playing on a loop for the entire world to see. "Alex," Sterling said, his voice echoing in the vast marble space, "I have to thank you. You did exactly what we needed." I backed away, my head spinning. "What? I exposed you. It's everywhere." Sterling smiled, and it was the coldest thing I'd ever seen. "No, Alex, you didn't expose us. You just activated the final phase. Look at the bottom of the screen." I looked. Under the video of the drug smuggling, a scrolling ticker had appeared. It didn't mention Sterling. It didn't mention Marcus. It read, "Breaking. Local teenager hacks logistics giant. Admits to multi-million-dollar fraud and drug coordination. Authorities seek Alex. Last name for classified cartel links." My heart stopped. The Lumina Grid software. It hadn't just uploaded the files, it had digitally signed them with my fake credentials. It had embedded my certified ID into every single illegal manifest. "You're the mastermind now, Alex," Sterling whispered, "and masterminds don't usually survive the night." At that moment, the front glass doors of the building shattered as a black SUV slammed through them, and a voice over a megaphone screamed, "Federal agents, drop your weapons!" But the agents weren't pointing their guns at Sterling. They were pointing them at me. "Get on the ground! Now, hands behind your head!" The voice came from a man in a tactical vest labeled FBI. Behind him, a dozen more agents flooded through the shattered remains of the lobby doors, their weapon lights cutting through the smoke and the strobe-like flickering of the giant monitors. I didn't move. I couldn't. I was staring at the ticker tape on the screen. My name was there. My face, the one from my internal HR file, was being broadcast as the face of a national security threat. Sterling had flipped the script so perfectly it felt like a physical blow. By exaggerating my skills, I hadn't just gotten a better job. I'd provided them with the perfect high-tech scapegoat. Who would believe a kid who faked his way into an executive auditing position was an innocent victim? "He's armed," Marcus screamed, pointing at me. "He's got a weapon." I wasn't holding a weapon. I was holding my laptop like a shield. But in the chaos and the bad light, the agents didn't wait to check. "Drop it! Drop the device!" I saw the lead agent's finger tighten on the trigger. In that split second, I knew that if I stayed there, I was dead. Whether the feds shot me or Sterling's security team finished the job in the crossfire didn't matter. I was a loose end that was about to be snipped. The building's fire suppression system suddenly hissed to life. A massive surge from the Lumina Grid software, still churning through the company's ancient server architecture, had tripped a thermal sensor. A cloud of fine chemical mist erupted from the ceiling, turning the lobby into an opaque white void. "Fire! Fire! Don't let him move!" I didn't think. I dived. I bolted toward the bank of elevators, but I knew those were death traps. Instead, I veered right, crashing through a set of heavy service doors marked "Authorized Personnel Only." I found myself in a narrow concrete corridor that smelled of ozone and dampness. Behind me, I heard the heavy thud of boots and the frantic shouting of the agents. "He went into the service wing. Seal the exits." I ran. My lungs burned, and my heart felt like it was trying to punch its way out of my ribs. I wasn't an athlete. I was a kid who spent too much time at a desk, but the adrenaline was a hell of a drug. I found a staircase and went down, not toward the basement where Sterling and his men were, but deeper into the sublevels where the massive cooling fans and power generators hummed. I ducked into a cramped server closet on sublevel 3, my chest heaving. I slid down the wall, clutching the laptop to my chest. It was hot, vibrating with the effort of the massive data sync I'd triggered. I opened the lid. The screen was a chaotic mess of scrolling logs. The global broadcast was still running, but something was wrong. The data I had seen in the lobby, the ticker tape calling me a criminal, wasn't coming from the files I'd uploaded. I began to type, my fingers flying over the keys. I needed to see the source code of the broadcast. I needed to see how they'd hijacked my sink. Come on, I whispered. I bypassed the user interface and went straight into the Lumina Grid kernel. And that's when I saw it. The software wasn't just an auditing tool, it was a Trojan horse. Marcus hadn't told me to use it because it was powerful. He'd told me to use it because it was designed to rewrite history. Every time I mirrored a ledger, the software was actually deleting the original record and replacing it with a version that featured my digital signature. Sterling and Marcus hadn't just been smuggling drugs. They were using Arca Global to move something else, something buried in the Project Revenant files that I hadn't fully decrypted yet. I clicked on a hidden subfolder labeled Payroll-Ext. I expected to see names of corrupt cops or port officials. Instead, I saw a list of high-ranking government officials, senators, judges, and even a deputy director of the FBI. Next to each name was a dollar amount and a delivery status. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just a corporate fraud. It was a massive, systemic blackmail and bribery ring. The drugs in the crates weren't just for profit. They were the currency used to buy the people who were currently hunting me down. Suddenly, the screen on my laptop flickered. A small window opened in the corner. It was a chat prompt. Unknown. You're still alive. Impressive. I stared at the screen. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely type. Me. Who is this? Unknown. Someone who actually knows how to use Lumina Grid. Look at the file Revenant-001. It's not a ledger. It's a blueprint. I navigated to the file. It was a massive CAD drawing of a shipping container. But the container didn't have a floor. It had a reinforced lead-lined compartment underneath. And in that compartment wasn't powder. It was a device. A series of cylinders connected to a central processor. Me. What is this? A bomb? Unknown. Worse. It's a prototype. Arca Global isn't a logistics company anymore, Alex. It's a manufacturer. They aren't just moving things. They're building them for the highest bidder. Sterling didn't want you to find the drugs. He wanted you to find the leak so he could test how well the frame-up worked. Me. Why are you telling me this? Unknown. Because Marcus was my brother, and they killed him 10 minutes ago in that lobby. I felt a chill go down my spine. Marcus was dead? He'd been standing right there. Me. He was trying to kill me. Unknown. He was trying to get you out. The gun he was holding? It was a prop. No firing pin. He was trying to make the feds hesitate so you'd have a chance to run. He knew Sterling was going to burn you both. He played the villain to give you a head start. I looked at the broken mirror shard still stuck in the sleeve of my jacket. I remembered the way Marcus had leaned against the door, the way he'd slammed me against the elevator wall. He hadn't been trying to hurt me. He'd been positioning me away from the door. A heavy thud echoed from the other side of the server closet door. Then, the sound of a key card swiping. Unknown. They've tracked your MAC address. Get out of the sublevels. Go to the rooftop. There's a ventilation shaft in the server room. It leads to the HVAC exhaust. I didn't have time to process the news about Marcus. I scrambled to my feet, grabbed the laptop, and looked up. There it was, a steel grate. I dragged a heavy server rack over, climbed up, and kicked the grate open. I hauled myself into the dark, narrow shaft just as the door to the closet burst open. "Clear," a voice barked. "He's not here. Wait, the vent. He's in the vents." I crawled as fast as I could, the metal groaning under my weight. The air was hot and smelled of burnt dust. I could hear them below me shouting, their guns clicking as they readied them. I reached a junction and turned left, following the faint blue light of my laptop screen. After what felt like miles of crawling, I reached a large circular opening. I pushed through and found myself on the roof of the Arca Global building. The cold night air hit me like a physical weight. Below, the city was a sea of sirens. Dozens of police cars and black SUVs were cordoning off the block. I ran to the edge of the roof, looking for a way down, but there was no fire escape, no ladder, just a 40-story drop to the pavement. Behind me, the roof access door flew open. Mr. Sterling stepped out, followed by 4 men in tactical gear. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket anymore. He looked calm, almost bored. "Give it up, Alex," Sterling said, his voice carrying over the wind. "The unknown you were chatting with? That was me. I needed to see if you had the courage to make it to the roof. It's a long way down, and there's nowhere left to run." I backed toward the ledge, the wind whipping my hair. "Marcus, you killed him." "Marcus was a sentimental fool," Sterling shrugged. "He thought he could save a kid he barely knew. Now hand over the laptop, the global broadcast you sent. It's being intercepted as we speak. We're rerouting the data to a server in North Korea. By tomorrow morning, the world will think you were selling state secrets to a foreign power." I looked at the laptop. The battery was at 4%. "I'm not giving you anything," I said, my voice shaking. "Then you're of no more use to me," Sterling said. He nodded to one of the men. The man raised a high-powered rifle, the red laser dot dancing across my forehead. "Wait!" I screamed. "Look at the screen, Sterling! Look at what's happening!" Sterling paused, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. He looked at the giant digital billboard across the street, the one that was still showing my face. The image of my face suddenly dissolved. It was replaced by a live video feed, but it wasn't the warehouse. It wasn't the drugs. It was a view of the roof. Right now. Sterling's face was on the screen, clear as day, standing next to men with rifles pointed at a terrified 18-year-old. And in the corner of the screen, a small logo was pulsing. It was the logo for Lumina Grid. "You forgot one thing about aggressive self-marketing, Mr. Sterling," I said, a wild, desperate laugh bubbling up in my throat. "I didn't just learn how to use the software. I learned how to rewrite the permissions." Sterling's face went from calm to murderous. "Kill him! Now!" The sniper pulled the trigger. But as the sound of the shot echoed across the skyline, the roof beneath my feet didn't just vibrate. It exploded. The world didn't go black. It went white. A blinding, searing flash accompanied by a roar that felt less like a sound and more like a physical punch to the chest. The sniper's bullet didn't hit my head. It hit the corner of my laptop, the high-grade lithium-ion battery and the internal capacitors. Between the bullet's kinetic energy and the 4% charge left in the cells, the device I'd been holding like a shield turned into a localized frag grenade. The force of the blast threw me backward. My heels hit the edge of the roof, and for a terrifying heartbeat, I was weightless. The night sky over the city tilted, the stars and the smog-filled horizon swapping places. I didn't fall 40 stories, though. I slammed onto a narrow, graded maintenance catwalk 5 feet below the primary roofline. The air was knocked out of me in a ragged gasp. My ears were ringing with a high, sustained whistle, and my hands were stinging with dozens of tiny shrapnel wounds from the laptop's casing. Above me, the roof was a chaotic silhouette of fire and shadows. "Find him!" Sterling's voice screamed, sounding like it was coming from the bottom of a deep well. "He's on the lower ledge. Finish it!" I scrambled to my feet, my vision swimming. I didn't have the laptop anymore. My leverage, my proof, and my only weapon were now a charred piece of plastic and silicon smoking on the roof above. I was just an 18-year-old kid in a torn button-down shirt, bleeding from a dozen small cuts, trapped on a 3-foot-wide strip of metal. I looked down. The catwalk led toward a massive industrial cooling tower, a cylindrical beast of humming fans and wet, vibrating metal. I ran. Every step on the metal grating sounded like a gunshot. Behind me, I heard the heavy thud of the tactical team jumping down onto the ledge. I didn't look back. I reached the cooling tower and saw a vertical access ladder. I slid down it, the friction burning the skin off my palms, until I hit the roof of the 39th floor, a secondary terrace filled with HVAC units. I ducked behind a massive air scrubber just as a hail of suppressed gunfire chewed into the metal where I'd been standing a second before. They weren't trying to capture me anymore. They were erasing me. I fumbled in my pocket. My phone. I still had my personal phone. It was an old model with a cracked screen, but it was all I had. I pulled it out, my fingers slick with blood. No bars, no signal. Of course, I thought, a bitter laugh escaping my throat. They've jammed the local cell towers. But then, the phone vibrated. A single notification popped up on the screen. It wasn't a text or a call. It was a local area file transfer, a protocol that didn't need a cell tower, just proximity. Transferring, Revenant _ key _ 01.MP4, 99%. The phone buzzed again. Transfer complete. I tapped the file. My screen flickered and a video began to play. It was Marcus. He was sitting in his car, the one I'd seen him in 100 times in the company parking lot. He looked pale. His tie loosened. "Alex," Marcus's voice came through the tiny speaker, whispered and urgent. "If you're seeing this, I'm probably dead. I know you think I'm the villain. I played the part because Sterling needed to believe I was as corrupt as he is. But I've been building a backdoor into Luminagrid for 3 years. I didn't pick you because you were a fraud, kid. I picked you because I saw you looking at those manifests in the basement. I saw you notice the weight discrepancies. I knew you were the only one sharp enough to find the breadcrumbs I left." I stared at the screen, tears pricking my eyes. The gunfire was getting closer. The men were moving in a pincer maneuver around the HVAC units. "The Project Revenant folder you found?" Marcus continued. "That's not the whole story. The drugs and the prototypes, they're just the distraction. Look at the shipping destination for the lead-lined crates. They aren't going to a foreign power, Alex. They're going to the 14th Street Federal Building tomorrow morning during the National Security Summit." The video cut to a document, a manifest I hadn't seen. It showed the delivery time, 8 a.m. The contents weren't drugs or electronics. They were labeled dignitary gifts. "Sterling isn't just a smuggler," Marcus hissed. "He's the architect of a coup. He's going to take out the entire cabinet in one go, and he's using your expert signature to authorize the delivery. You're the one who cleared the crates through security. You're the one who's going to be blamed for the end of the government." The video ended. I leaned my head against the cold metal of the air scrubber. It was bigger than I ever imagined. It wasn't just a fraud or a drug ring. It was a goddamn assassination plot, and I had signed the death warrants with my own fake credentials. "There he is!" I looked up. One of the tactical team members had spotted me from a higher vantage point. He leveled his rifle. I dived to the left, rolling across the gravel-covered roof as a bullet sparked off the gravel inches from my face. I reached the edge of the 39th floor. There was a window washing rig, a heavy metal platform suspended by thick steel cables. I lunged for it, vaulted over the railing, and hit the down switch. The rig groaned, then began to descend with agonizing slowness. I was a sitting duck. I looked up and saw the sniper leaning over the edge of the roof, aiming his rifle straight down at me. "Goodbye, Alex," he mouthed. He pulled the trigger. The glass of the office window behind me shattered, but I didn't feel any pain. Instead, I heard a loud, metallic twang. The sniper hadn't shot me. He'd shot the primary suspension cable of the window washing rig. The platform tilted violently to the side. I grabbed the guardrail as the rig began to swing like a pendulum, 40 stories above the street. The secondary cable held, but it was frayed, the steel wires snapping one by one with a sound like a violin string breaking. I looked into the window of the 38th floor, the floor I was currently dangling in front of. It was dark except for a single green light on a wall-mounted panel. The panel wasn't for the office lights. It was a security terminal for the building's internal elevator shaft, and sitting right in front of it, tied to a chair with his head lolling to the side, was Marcus. He wasn't dead. Not yet. But he was rigged to something. A device was strapped to his chest. The same kind of cylinders I'd seen in the blueprints for Project Revenant. And on the screen of the security terminal, a timer was counting down. 0059. 0058, 0057. I was hanging by a single fraying thread over a 40-story drop, staring at the man who had tried to save me while he sat atop a bomb that was about to level half the block. And then, my phone buzzed one last time. A message from the unknown user, the one Sterling claimed to be but couldn't have been if he was on the roof with me. Unknown. The door is unlocked, Alex, but you have to choose. Save the witness or save the world. You have 45 seconds. The secondary cable snapped with a sound like a gunshot. The window-washing platform lurched violently, dropping 3 feet and swinging away from the building. I lost my footing, my stomach doing a slow-motion somersault as I stared down at the dizzying abyss of the city streets. I was a heartbeat away from being a smudge on the pavement. The rig swung back toward the 38th floor with the force of a wrecking ball. I didn't wait. I didn't calculate. I just jumped. I crashed through the heavy plate glass window, my arms shielding my face. Shards of glass rained down around me like diamonds as I tumbled onto the carpeted floor of the darkened office. I rolled, gasping for air, the smell of ozone and burnt electronics filling my lungs. "Alex!" The voice was weak, a raspy whisper. I scrambled to my feet, glass crunching under my shoes. Marcus was right there, tied to a heavy steel chair in the center of the room. A tangle of wires and glowing blue cylinders was strapped to his chest, the same prototype I'd seen in the blueprints. "Marcus, I'm here. I'm gonna get you out." I reached for the straps, but he feebly shook his head. "Don't touch the casing. It's a proximity trigger. If the sensors detect a manual override, it'll detonate the primary charges in the shipping yard. It's a synchronized mesh network." I looked at the timer on the wall terminal, 0032. "Sterling said he was the unknown," I yelled, my voice frantic. "He said he was the one chatting with me." "He lied," Marcus coughed, a thin trail of blood trickling from his lip. "He wanted you to give up, to jump. The unknown. It's a localized AI I built into the Lumina Grid kernel. It's a fail-safe. It's meant to find the person with the highest system interaction score and guide them." "I don't have a score, Marcus. I'm 18. I lied on my resume." "You didn't lie about your brain," Marcus said, his eyes locking onto mine with a terrifying intensity. "You found the discrepancies. You bypassed the firewalls. You did, in 48 hours, what a team of senior analysts couldn't do in a year. You weren't a fraud, Alex. You were just undercertified." 021. "How do I stop it?" I asked, pulling out my cracked phone. "The local area transfer. The key I sent you. It's a master key, but it needs a validator. You have to interface with the terminal and packet void the detonation signal. But the terminal is encrypted with a triple-layer biometric lock. It's looking for Sterling's fingerprint, his retinal scan, and his voice." I looked at the terminal. Then I looked at my phone. The global broadcast was still active, though the feed was being jammed. "I don't have Sterling's fingerprint," I whispered, "but I have his data." I remembered the V-lookup I'd been struggling with on my first day, the hard way Marcus had warned me against. I realized then that aggressive self-marketing wasn't just about lying. It was about using every piece of information you had to create a new reality. I plugged my phone into the terminal's USB-C service port. The screen flickered. Biometric validation required. "Marcus, tell the terminal to run a mirror audit on the executive data cache," I shouted. "What? Why?" "Just do it." Marcus barked the command. The terminal began to pull data from the main server. I navigated through the folders I'd scanned during my 2-day marathon. I didn't need Sterling's actual finger. I needed the digital map of his fingerprint stored in the HR security files. I didn't need his eye. I needed the high-resolution retinal scan he'd provided for the building's top-tier insurance policy. I found the files. I dragged them into the Lumina Grid validator window. Fingerprint, match. Retinal scan, match. 010. Voice authentication, required, please state access code. "I don't have his voice," I said, my heart sinking. "Marcus, I don't have a recording of his voice." "The lobby!" Marcus yelled. "The video feed you broadcast. It has his voice from when he was talking to the tactical team." I frantically scrolled through the buffered video on my phone. I found the clip. Sterling saying, "You're the mastermind now, Alex." I isolated the audio and hit play against the terminal's microphone. Voice, match, access granted. The timer on the wall froze at 0004. The blue glow in the cylinders faded. A soft mechanical click echoed in the room as the magnetic locks on Marcus's chair released. I lunged forward, catching him as he slumped toward the floor. "You did it," Marcus whispered, a ghost of a grin returning to his face. "You actually did it." The door to the office didn't burst open. It slid aside with a hiss. Mr. Sterling stood there, framed by the red emergency lights of the hallway. He was alone. The tactical team was gone, likely fleeing as the police and the real FBI finally breached the lower floors. Sterling didn't have a gun. He looked at the frozen timer, then at me, then at Marcus. "A remarkable performance, Alex," Sterling said, his voice smooth and cold. "Truly. You saved your friend. You saved the summit. But you're still a criminal. The world still thinks you're the one who built that bomb. My lawyers will have me in a private jet to a non-extradition country before you even finish your first police interview." "I don't think so," I said, standing up. My legs were shaking, but I didn't let him see it. "And why is that?" Sterling asked, taking a step into the room. "The broadcast was jammed. The servers are being wiped. There is no evidence left that connects me to Project Revenant." I held up my phone. The screen was black. "The broadcast wasn't for the world," I said. "I wasn't sending it to the news or the internet. I was sending it to the one place that has its own independent, unjammable satellite uplink." Sterling's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" "The shipping containers," I said. "The lead-lined ones. They have GPS tracking units that sync directly with the global maritime distress and safety system. It's an automated loop. I used the Lumina Grid master key to upload the entire blackmail list, the senators, the judges, the deputy director, to every ship and port authority on the planet as a critical safety alert." Sterling's face went from pale to ghostly white. "By now," I continued, "every Coast Guard vessel in the Atlantic has your name, your face, and the manifest of those crates. You didn't just expose yourself to the feds, Mr. Sterling. You exposed yourself to the people you were trying to blackmail, and I don't think they're going to be as patient as the police." From the street below, a new sound rose above the sirens. It was the rhythmic thud, thud, thud of heavy transport helicopters. Searchlights flooded the room, turning the darkness into day. Sterling looked at the window, then back at me. He looked like a man who had finally realized he was playing a game he didn't understand. "Who are you?" he whispered. I looked at him, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a kid from a basement. I didn't feel like a fraud or a data entry clerk. "I'm the guy who's overqualified for this job," I said. The door behind Sterling exploded inward as the real FBI SWAT team finally arrived. Sterling was tackled to the ground before he could even raise his hands. 18 months later, I sat in a much nicer office. It wasn't in a logistics firm. It was in a glass-walled building in D.C., overlooking the Potomac. I wasn't wearing a suit, and I wasn't entry-level. Marcus was there too, though he walked with a cane now. He was the head of the Bureau's new Corporate Integrity Task Force. "So," Marcus said, leaning against my desk, "some things never change. The director wants to know if you're ready to take over the lead audit position for the European sector. It's a big jump. Lots of responsibility." I looked at the official offer letter on my desk. It listed a salary I couldn't have imagined at 18. It listed Senior Forensic Auditor as the title. "I don't know, Marcus," I said, a slow grin spreading across my face. "I looked at the requirements. It says I need 10 years of experience in international law and a master's degree in cryptography." Marcus laughed, tossing a familiar stress ball into the air. "And? What are you going to tell them?" I picked up my pen and signed the bottom of the document. I'm going to tell them I'm an expert, I said, and this time it won't even be a lie.